Hearing any audio, like extra audio from my end, Anne?
I'm sorry, Jeremy, what'd you say?
Just saying, do you hear any like extra weird audio from me whenever I'm muted?
There's a little bit of an echo from you.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out what it is. Currently, there are two of me in this meeting, and I'm not sure how that's possible. So, I'm trying to
You're
figure that
just so
out.
awesome that there are two of you.
Really?
Now
Oh, God.
your evil twin left.
Thank goodness.
Okay, I think Megan, are you there? I have to apologize. I'm eating my lunch while we have this meeting. So I hope that's okay. So I believe I sent you guys an agenda. Did I send you a copy of an agenda? Hi, Miss Pickle. Just want to start out the meeting with just understanding of our norms. And they're listed at the top of the agenda, just respecting the schedule by making sure we start on time. I apologize that I'm eating, wanted to make sure I was here, but still take care of some personal business. Respect the work of all the committee members. So just be respectful of everybody's input and everybody's thoughts and feelings regarding this meeting and the product from this meeting. Then make sure that we're allowing each person to speak and listen to each other with full intent to understand what everybody is, the message that they're trying to get across, the information that they're trying to share. And let's just be respectful of the agenda and make sure that we are staying to the agenda and getting through all of the items that are in front of us today. So let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. Let's go ahead and start with Kelton. Kelton, could you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you teach, and a fun fact about yourself.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelton Burnside. I'm the Associate Director of Orchestras here at Plano East. So I teach among 5 orchestra ensembles throughout the day. Fun fact about me is that I'm from New York originally, and here I am teaching in Texas.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and move to Jeremy.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jeremy Rower. This is my first year teaching at Plano East, and I don't remember very many fun facts myself, so I guess that's my fun fact too. This is my first year of teaching. Just graduated from University of North Texas. I'm sorry, were there any details I needed to say? Anything else I needed to add?
Nope, that's it. You're good. I think there's probably some fun fact about you. You're just not willing to share.
I'm that, or I'm not that. It's that kind of a fact, but.
Hey, all right, Megan, Miss Pickle. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Oh. Megan said this is slow glitchy. I'm not sure why. You would think this would be better than it was 3 years ago, right? Zoom meetings. Megan, do you want to type into the chat some information?
Can you hear me if I?
We can hear you now.
Yay! Okay, sorry about that, everyone. My name is Megan Pickle. I am an associate band director here at Plano East. This is my 3rd year here at East, 10th year teaching overall. And fun fact about me is I have a little corgi named Pebbles. and I love her so much.
Aw, how cute. That's awesome. Thank you for introducing yourselves and thank you for being here this afternoon. I know how busy we all are, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule for this. So the purpose of this committee is to develop a walkthrough, a form for walkthrough observations for the campus. And so we are going to go over some material, and we're going to also look at some other campus walkthrough documents. And we are going to create a document for ourselves for here on Plano East. And so the first thing that I want to talk about are the 4 categories of a classroom observation. And the first category is classroom management or classroom organization. So one of the things that one of the first things to look for when you're in a classroom walkthrough is how the classroom is organized, how the instruction is organized, etc. And so what are some of the characteristics that you would want to look for when you go in a classroom with regards to classroom organization and instructional organization?
I'll go ahead and chime in. I think one of the things that I think about that kind of keeps lessons moving along, and that I've had to really be intentional about this year, is kind of transitions from one activity to the next. Because sometimes if those transitions aren't planned effectively, then things can get off task, and especially in certain class periods where there are a lot of kids in the room, it can really it takes a while to reel them back in. So I would say probably transitions would be one big thing I would think about, if just first thing that would pop off the brain for me.
Okay. Anybody else with some instructional organization ideas? Ms. Pickle?
So for me, it's a lot about what the space looks like when you come into the classroom. And for us as fine arts classes, our level of organization is a little bit different than if we were just to have desks and things like that. But our chairs or our risers organized in a way that the students can easily access where they're supposed to sit? Do they have access to their lockers? Do they have access to the use of stands or practice rooms or things like that? Or are there things in the way and students have to navigate around that? With everything that's going on in their life, we need to be able to streamline them entering the classroom and being able to do what they need to do, as well through transition periods with all of that stuff. And how can we facilitate that type of navigation a little bit more smoothly than to have more interruptions than what we get on a daily basis anyway.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you, Megan. Mr. Brent, anything to add?
Absolutely. So I love that you guys are talking about kind of how the space looks, the maybe like routines or things that the kids are coming in and demonstrating while they're entering the room. Something that I found really important is having the goals for the class maybe in a place that's visible for the kids so that they see those. And then kind of as the class is running, how the teacher is interacting with the students, how the teacher is moving through the space, how the kids are moving through the space, how maybe students are acting within that space. Has that space been set up in a way that they're encouraged to be focused and on task? What does the teacher do to maybe move that or redirect them? Yeah.
Is this something that you feel is an important part of a walkthrough or an important part of the classroom? That teachers are organized in their instruction and in their classroom management?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. That is one of the aspects of this walkthrough, is to design a walkthrough that is something that is important to us, that we see as important, that anybody coming into our classroom would be able to see and take back and improve their learning environment as well. The next category is student engagement. And specifically, what are some specific clues that you would look for in a classroom that shows the students are at a high level of engagement? What kind of things would you be looking for?
I can start us off. I think seeing the students kind of engaged or looking at visuals. If it's something where the students are participating with the teacher, that they're raising their hand and volunteering answers. If it's something where they're in small groups, that each student has their way of participating or is contributing to the conversation in some sort of way. And, you know, having taught high school, I think one of the big things that is a distraction for students are electronics. And so having a classroom policy and having students follow those classroom routines and policies to have those away to make sure they're not distracted during the lesson.
Hey, cool. Thank you. The electronics is huge. Yeah. Ms. Pickle, do you have any ideas or thoughts on support high level of engagement?
I agree a lot with what Mr. Burnside said. I think again for our, you know, medium, it's a little bit different to see certain levels of engagement through our students versus again like in a core classroom and things like that. So for us, sometimes the level of engagement can be shown through production of music or through a rehearsal, you know, tactic or things like that. But in a different environment, you know, like what Kelton was saying, we can see different levels of interaction in small group work or in responding to the teacher through, you know, different courses of dialogue, question and answer type interactions, and continuing to further the discussion. What can come after that initial response? You know, this is a new level of engagement because we're actually doing critical thinking beyond, you know, just the baseline of, you know, what is the answer to this question type thing.
That's great. Thank you, Ms. Pickle. Thank you very much. Any other comments or thoughts on student engagement?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally agreeing with what both of y'all say, especially the whole question and answer format, because it really just allows us to check in on that student engagement. I mean, a lesson I was doing today was very much like not that way because we were trying to learn as much stuff as possible. So I was just cruising through, but still being able to look up and check in. And sometimes it was just good to be able to be like, oh, you know, we're not all in the same place right now. We need to reset. Something that I think about is kind of like essentially building on that response-based idea. So like sometimes we'll be like, all right, so we're going to, you know, page 4, look up when you're there. Or something like, we're going to do this now, you know, snap, you know, something along those lines, where it has this, like the students have to do something to show us that and it doesn't have to just be like, yeah, you're all there, right? And then they could be like, yeah, but like, are they really? But then they have to respond by looking up or physically doing something to for us to be able to check in on where they are and seeing their engagement level.
That's why young teachers are great, is because that is a new takeaway idea for me in my classroom, is that when we're doing something that we're trying to get through, like sight reading, I'll start having them do something at measure 57 to make sure we all get there at the same time. Thank you. Awesome. And, you know, we're kind of unique in the sense that our kids have to be engaged in order for our rehearsals to go, to be productive. And so we have a little bit of an advantage there. But still, the level of engagement, we know when certain students are engaged at the same level or some are not as engaged as others. But that necessarily wouldn't be evident for a core classroom teacher walking through our class. So the next category is a little bit more difficult, I think, to identify, but it's the alignment of instruction. And so one of the things that I think we all appreciate and we all understand is the importance of alignment of instruction across our classes, but also across our grade levels from 6th grade all the way through 12th grade. And so what are some clues that we would find in a classroom that would indicate that there is an alignment of instruction either across our classes on our campus or across our classes from 6th grade through 12th grade? It's a little more challenging. Ms. Pickle?
So the first thing that comes to mind for me, I would say, is vocabulary and being able to define words and have a general understanding of what that is supposed to mean. And of course, that can change and be interpreted in different ways depending on the style of the piece or what you're wanting from a musical standpoint. But being able to, ask a student who streamlines through our classes, and through our cluster here on the east side, and being able to say, okay, what do we mean when we say this? Or, if we say go to ready position, what does that mean? Or if we're saying go to set position, what does that mean? If we're saying, XYZ, whatever musical terminology this is, what does that mean? And how can you define that? And what do we do to put that into practice? I think that's one of the biggest ways to streamline things, because going through specific rehearsal techniques or warm-ups may differ from class to class depending on where they are in their development. Different classes have different needs for what it is that they're doing, but the basic knowledge and terminology should be uniform.
Yeah, and the autonomy of the teacher is important too. Like a teacher teaches, like you might teach differently than Mr. Albert or Mr. Brennan, but that alignment of vocabulary, the counting, the ready position, that is so critical. But at the same time, you have your own unique personalities that you bring to the classroom. Good. Anybody else with some thoughts on alignment? Mr. Burnside?
Kind of zooming out and looking from a macro level, some things that I think about are how the content is aligned maybe at a district or a school level. And so making sure that educators across the school or across the district are maybe adhering to like a common curriculum, again, acknowledging that teachers are going to teach in their own way and that we want them to have autonomy in the ways that they do that, but also having a curriculum and a scope and sequence that is mutually agreed upon by teachers at the campus or teachers across the district, that kind of gives a guideline for what students are learning across those courses for different teachers.
So what kind of clues will we see in the classroom if a teacher is aligned with the district curriculum or the cluster curriculum? What kind of things? Like the first thing that comes to my head would be like visual cues in the classroom, like whether it's posters or PowerPoints or things like that. Can anybody think of any other kind of visual cues that you would see in the classroom demonstrating that curriculum, that district-based curriculum?
I think that's great. Sorry. I know Jeremy is going to share something in a second. I also want to jump back to what Megan said of vocabulary and being really intent about the vocabulary usage. I think that can also demonstrate that, and goals. If the goals are visible to the students, I think that's another great way for them to see that. Sorry, Jeremy, go ahead.
No, that's okay, because I was gonna say exactly that. I was gonna build on, because I know you had mentioned goals earlier, and I feel like an easy way to show someone who's walking into your classroom for the first time that you are teaching off of some sort of curriculum is posting those goals on the board for the day, or putting up the TEKS and saying we're accomplishing this TEKS today, or something like that, and lining that up on the board is just an easy visual. I was also going to say that I absolutely just wholeheartedly agree with what Ms. Pickle had to say about vocabulary. I mean, I've heard stories of friends before who have been teaching in certain districts who said, yeah, the elementary music teachers teach this counting system. And then they jump up to the middle schools, and the middle schools are like, yeah, we don't care. We're now teaching this counting system. And it just causes so much craziness and wastes a lot of time, because now the kids are like, what? I thought this was how it goes. And no, we're going to do it this way now. And then you just have to waste a bunch of time reteaching all this stuff. Now, like having a slam dunk way of like having someone who's never been in your classroom before know for sure, yeah, you're doing exactly what your feeders are doing. I don't know. But because like it's easier to do that for the curriculum alignment, to see that there's an alignment with a curriculum, but to like easily just at the very first moment be like, yep, I'm walking in your classroom for the first time and you're definitely aligned with, all of your feeders. I don't know. But definitely keeping it aligned, I think, is super important.
Right. It is challenging to walk into one of our classrooms and figure out if we're aligned with the cluster or the district with curriculum. So it is very challenging. Good. Thank you. Lots of good ideas there. And then the last category that I want to talk about is the rigor of instruction. Like what cues do we find in the classroom if we were to walk in the classroom that demonstrates the level of instruction, the level of rigor? And there are 3 criteria that points to the level of rigor. And the first one is applying new concepts to different contexts. So applying that quarter note into different contexts. That the other criteria is that students have an opportunity to explain the concepts, or to explain or to demonstrate understanding of the concepts. And that the last one is that the students are given a strong scaffolding in order to understand, to support their understanding of a concept. And so those 3 criteria are important when we talk about rigor. So applying new concepts in different contexts, students having the opportunity to demonstrate understanding, and then students having a strong scaffold of support. And so what kind of things would you expect to see if you walked into a classroom with different levels of rigor of the instruction? Mr. Burnside?
So I'm going to try and give one thing for each of these criteria. When I think applying new concepts across different contexts, I think that evidence that the learning is linear, that the students have a grasp of previous concepts, that they're then extending into kind of new areas of learning. So seeing that the students are not like completely swimming in information, that they at least have the tools that they're going to continue to use in maybe a more complex setting. Talking about opportunities to explain understanding or concepts makes me think about feedback and the way that the teachers are collecting data or information and then giving feedback. So both through formal and informal assessment as they're making their way through the classroom, and giving students ways to individually or in a group show their understanding. And then the third criteria, giving a strong scaffold and giving that support, I think, again, goes back to those building blocks of whatever the skill is that we're working on, but also making sure or seeing that teachers are individualizing instruction especially for students with special needs in the class, but in general for the class as well, so that they're really reaching all learners.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything to share with the level of rigor?
So I think with again, there are different ways to show that throughout the curriculum. So with the groups that I have, the type of rigor that those students are experiencing is really in no comparison to the type of rigor that Wind Ensemble is experiencing, because rigor for my students looks like being able to build physical endurance to make it through a 45-minute class period, to be able to play the entire time. Whereas Wind Ensemble, we're working on developing technique further so that we can play a higher level of music. So I think that being able to apply new concepts within the scaffold of things, like kind of combining those two, like you're giving them the scaffold of support for understanding starting from the bottom up, and then you're applying those new concepts in different contexts all the time. You're constantly saying, okay, we're going to change this just a little bit, but remember, you have to continue doing this. So it's like we're learning to subtract, but you can't forget how to add. And now we're learning to divide, but you can't forget these other two things. You're constantly building on those things, and that's going to look different in your lower level performance groups in comparison to your upper level performance groups. And then the opportunities to explain understanding of those concepts, I think is also, it's a different experience in each class. One of my personal goals that I was going through with T-Test this year was working to help my kids develop the confidence to be able to share the ideas that they have, or to share what it is that they think they understand about something. And then if they say something that's not the right answer, it's like, okay, thank you for saying that. Thank you for sharing what it is that you're thinking. We're going to address why that's not the right answer, but why it's so commonly thought, because there's a reason why those things happen, you know? So being able to bring them out of their shell a little bit and be able to have those, the confidence to be able to have those conversations and to take the risks, you know, whereas again, compared to Wind Ensemble, they have that level of development and understanding already happening. So they're a little bit more comfortable with answering those questions.
Awesome. Thank you. That's a great T-test goal, by the way. That's pretty awesome. Okay, cool. Good. So the next thing that we need to do is I have examples of 4 walkthrough documents. The first one is the walkthrough document that Plano East utilizes, or our district utilizes. And I just wanted to go through these briefly and just get some thoughts on what you think is good about the walkthrough form and what you think you would like to see be different about the form. And so if we take a look at the Plano East document, and I emailed these to you, so you should have them in your email. They're all in separate files. The Plano East walkthrough document goes through several domains, planning, instruction, and then the learning environment, which is very similar to the 4 criteria that we talked about. And so I kind of wanted you to take a look at this and tell me what you like about it and what you would like to see maybe improved upon from this document. And I can start while you guys take a look. What I like about this is that it has the 3 areas very well outlined. That as a teacher, I know what is going to be looked for when a group or my administration comes into my room for a walkthrough. I know that they're going to be looking to see that there's evidence of planning. I know that they're going to look to see that the instruction is clear and that there's differentiation and there's rigor. And then the learning environment, the routines and the behavior system and the classroom management, I think it covers quite a bit of what happens in the classroom. The one thing that I would like to see a little different on this, and that really is coming from a musician standpoint or a music classroom standpoint, would be to go into a little bit more detail about the differences that are seen in our rehearsals, from our rehearsal to a standard traditional classroom. But because this is a generalized walkthrough, that obviously can't happen. But those are my thoughts on this. Anybody have any thoughts?
That's a really interesting thing. Do you think it's possible, even knowing that this is a general rubric, to place in something about the teaching being relevant to whatever the content is?
That's an idea.
Just kind of opening that up.
So teaching being relevant to the content.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that could be put into a general walkthrough and addressed very easily from even an art classroom or math classroom or, you know, auto mechanic classroom, etc. I think that's something that could be worked into it. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else have any thoughts on this document?
So again, kind of what Kelton was talking about, you know, making it a little bit more specific. Out of the multiple observations that I've had from my time in public education, oftentimes the response from the administrator is like, yeah, everything's great. Fine Arts puts this together and does it in their instruction in general. And so there's no like specific, like, okay, we should have monitored and adjusted here based on what is actually happening in the rehearsal versus like this kid decided to stand up and you corrected that good job, we fixed behavior, you know? And so when I was teaching middle school, our administration wanted us to submit a lesson plan prior to our formal observation. And that it added a different kind of feeling to it. It made me a little more anxious and like flashback to like student teaching, I guess, and, you know, wondering about, okay, what's going to happen now that I've submitted this and, you know, whatever else. But it also gave them a little bit more direct insight into what it is that we were doing. So I'm not in any means suggesting that submitting lesson plans are what needs to happen, because as we all know, in our specific rehearsal environment, it is ever changing. And 8 times out of 10, you don't meet the goal of what you have for your entire lesson, and you just pick up where you left off the next day. But I think that, you know, if there were like a baseline, almost like a questionnaire of what you fill out when you're going to have a formal observation or walkthrough, you know, and sometimes they don't like to do that because they don't want you to know what it is and whatever else. But if you could give them like a baseline of, hey, here's what's going on. We're going to try and spend this much time on warm-ups and our fundamentals. We've got this happening and, you know, whatever else, so that they kind of know and understand, like, maybe we're not going to see a lot of music making because we've just restructured our ensembles, and so we're only going to be working on fundamentals. Or maybe we're going to see a lot of music making and not a lot of the warm-up and, you know, basics and fundamentals and all of that stuff, because we're a week away from contest. You know, there is this ebb and flow that happens in fine arts that doesn't change as much in a core classroom setting, from my understanding.
So really evidence of planning, not necessarily a lesson plan, but evidence of planning. This is the general scope of what this class is going to be, or this rehearsal is going to be, and somehow have that available for whomever is walking through, doing the walkthrough. Because we do, even though we may not formally have a lesson plan like core classes do, we do have a plan. We do have learning objectives. We do know what we want to accomplish with that specific rehearsal. It is ever changing. It does most of the time end up going off the rails and we do something else. But that evidence of planning is something that is important, that it sounds like you would like administration to see as part of a walkthrough. Okay. Yeah.
I think it just gives them a better understanding of the depth of what we actually do, as some of our things are not as quantitative. We don't have as many number reports that can show our level of growth, you know, and meanwhile, we take our stuff home and we're score studying and we're listening to reference recordings and we're, you know, planning for 3 weeks from now, not just 3 classes from now. So
no, I think that's great. Thank you. Awesome. One of the other walkthroughs that we have in here is one from the Ohio Teacher Evaluation System. And it is a pretty basic it's a pretty basic walkthrough, or an informal evaluation. And really just a checkbox of like, what, 14 checkboxes. Instruction is appropriate, learning outcomes and goals are clearly communicated to the students, varied instructional tools, grade appropriate, instructional time used effectively. I think this is a good tool to use for teachers that are a little bit further along in the continuum of quality teaching. Somebody who is a little bit more of an efficient, effective teacher than somebody who may be a younger, more novice teacher. What are your thoughts on that?
I can agree with that. I also think that this is beneficial in any environment, really, to just have a tool that's very quick and very simple, as opposed to the Plano East document that we had was, a few pages long, several pages long, gives the objective, the dimensions and domains but really is kind of for the administrator to expand upon what they see. And this is really just a quick check. Here's what I observed. Gives teachers the opportunity to see what they did well or what was observed, and also the things that weren't observed, so that they can tell, you know, hey, does this normally happen in my classroom? Or I maybe missed this, and this would be a good thing for me to know for my upcoming formal evaluations and just in general to bring to the classroom.
Okay, that's a good thought. Thank you, Mr. Burnside. Anybody else have thoughts on this, the Ohio teacher evaluation?
Yeah, I will say that I do appreciate how brief it is. Like it is kind of nice to not have to, like, when you receive that when you receive that feedback, it is kind of nice to just receive the one sheet and just in like 10 seconds be like, oh, okay. And just kind of, and then there's like a quick place underneath for the comments and ways to improve. The Plano East one is more detailed, so you're able to specifically, like, you could maybe even dive in a little bit deeper, but it is, like Mr. Burnside mentioned, many, many pages long. So I do just kind of like how it's short and sweet, and you're kind of able to understand exactly what it is that it's getting at pretty quickly.
Okay. Cool. So taking into consideration that this one's short and sweet and that the Plano East is a little bit longer, what are your thoughts on the Louisville City Schools? Which I feel like is kind of a meet in the middle between the two. It focuses on the learning, it focuses on the classroom environment, it focuses on the instruction. And again, it's a checklist, although a little bit longer of a checklist. But what are your thoughts on that?
So I think this one, as it has more kind of, you know, things that you are to focus on, for me, like, I think what I appreciate about the way that we are evaluated in our T-test system is that there's a clear like rubric for us to be able to meet certain levels and things like that, and it's very clear. And this may just be the way that my mind works and it helps me, you know, or whatever else. But on this one, like, I'm left wondering, how many am I supposed to get out of each column? Am I focused on the entire column, or am I focused on the like sub columns, you know, subcategories of things where like embedded literacy only has 2, but then research-based strategies has 9 or 10, you know? And so where is my level of success determined, and how is that determined? Am I supposed to get all from a certain thing, or, you know, not? Like, because what happens if I don't get a check mark? I think a lot of teachers are now, because we are going through all of these things, it's like, well, wait, why didn't I get the check mark? Wait a second. And then there's not a lot of room for feedback here. And of course, you know, when you go through a you know, your summative meeting and things like that, you have conversations about what your observer saw, and things like that. But if this were handed to me like a checkout form at a doctor's office, and then the administrator left the room and I saw it, I'd be like, am I dying or no? Because I don't, what's happening? So, you know, again, I appreciate how it's more specific, but it's still vague, even though it is specific.
Okay. Well, it sounds to me like we're not going to be able to discuss all of these because we have a class that we need to get to here in a couple minutes. So I don't want to keep you much longer, but it sounds to me like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you agree that a checklist that is a little bit, a walkthrough that's a little bit more to the point, one that doesn't leave you wondering, but addresses those 4 categories that we talked about, as well as bringing in some sort of evidence of preparation or evidence of planning, maybe not necessarily a lesson plan, but evidence of planning, bringing that into the document would be extremely helpful for you if somebody were to come walk through. That's something that you would want somebody to see. Does that sound pretty fair that those are the 4 categories and then add in that evidence of planning? Okay, so this has been great. I'm going to take all of your ideas and we are going to combine it into a walkthrough document, and I will share that document with you here in the next day or so. And excited to take the document, actually do some walkthroughs with it and see what kind of results we get from it. So thank you for your time. Before you go, before I dismiss you, if you could make sure that you go to that Google form that I sent you and sign in for the meeting to show that you were here. I would appreciate that, you taking care of that as soon as we're done here. If you guys don't have any other information or thoughts that you want to share, again, thank you for your time. This was really insightful. I took some great notes and I'm looking forward to sharing that document with you as soon as we have it together. So thank you very much, guys. Have a good
Thank you.